Our panel discussion will put the spotlight on attracting a diverse talent pool, the trends, the challenges, and opportunities. Please put your hands together as I invite each of our distinguished panelists on stage. She is General Manager, People Resources, Westlife Food World Limited. Please welcome Sherry Bengra. He is Group Head Talent, Raymond Limited. Please welcome Dr. Srikanth PB. He is Customer Care Associate and DVP L&D Shopper Stop Limited. Please welcome Saurabh Deshpande. She is Diversity, Equity and Inclusion and Community Engagement Leader at Amazon. Please welcome Manisha Patel. And ladies and gentlemen, to moderate the discussion, please welcome Chief Executive Officer and Co-Founder, Trust for Retailers and Retail Associates of India, or TRAIN, Amisha Prabhu. Come on, put your hands together warmly and welcome them in a collective round of applause as I hand over to Amisha Prabhu and this wonderful panel. Over to you.
Thanks, Yogo. I think what Usha just mentioned, there's lots that has been spoken about since morning. And if I refer to my notes, I think I'll have enough work for the next 1 year till I see you next year at Ecom. We spoke about why DEI. We said we had a lot of strong cases, narratives which said why DEI is important. So assuming that's established, we move to why is it important and how do we actually practice DEI. From there, we spoke about multi-generational workforce and what do you do as inclusive leaders to ensure that this workforce is part of your organization, part of the community and the ecosystem that we thrive in. Now we have to dwell into one of the most important things, and all of these esteemed panelists are practitioners. Not I work with all of them, and let me tell you that everything that they say today is, whether it is a trend, whether it is a challenge, or whether it is an opportunity, is something that they are doing day in and day out. It's part of their day jobs. So there's a lot that I can talk to them, but there are few pertinent questions that we have which we would like to share with you as to what are the trends when we are trying to attract a diverse workforce, what are the opportunities, and along with that, what are the challenges and how you mitigate them. I do understand that today the hiring trends have changed. We are no more inviting CVs, sieving through the CVs and saying, okay, now this is, I need 2% of my workforce to be persons with disability, this is easy and this is how I do it. So nothing is linear, nothing is something which is very straight line, 101 basic, right? So each one of them will bring in a perspective, and like I said, maybe I don't have too much time to get into the depth of it, but there are a few questions that I'd like to first start off with Sherry. We spoke about the talent landscape. Sherry with McDonald's has a huge workforce which is young, which is diverse, and has a generational diversity as we call it. So what are the key shifts in the workforce demographics and expectations?
Yeah, thank you, Amisha. I think, what we have seen in the last couple of years with this sudden growth in QSR and the industries, and we hire almost 11,000, frontline workforce, right? That's huge, and it's a permanent workforce for us. And it is a representation of our customers as well, right? Because as a customer profile demographics is changing, so is our workforce, right? So a large, yes, Gen Z workforce is coming in. But also understand that with McDonald's, we have people as old as the first McDonald's itself in the organization, right? So there are, people who are 26 years in operations versus people who are very fresh, very new, who are coming into the organization as well. And with McDonald's as a company as well evolving, I think even our support functions are evolving, right? Digital is the new thing, social media coming in. So we're bringing in a lot of external talent from various industries, not necessarily from QSR, right? So the type of people and talent that are coming are also diverse from various backgrounds, right? Having seen various different industries. And what we're seeing is basically at the core of it, what they're looking at is an experience. And in McDonald's, we say X drives CX, right? So employee experience drives the customer experience, and how do we drive it? And because of that, it's very important for us to build the employee value proposition. What are we providing them? And that's something about their own internal growth. I think the value people are putting in more than designation, positions, and growth is what is the growth in it for me, right? So how am I driving individual people journeys, development journeys, even in our restaurants, right? So McDonald's entire restaurant learning journey, right? And they see how far they can grow today, right? Including, we have many women market managers, we have women operation consultants who have grown from crew and above, right? Because that's the promise that we are trying to build, that you have a career path. We are giving you individual people development journeys. And those are some of the fulcrums that are helping us adopt these two different, extremely different ideas and dichotomy. But at the core, everybody wants growth. I think that's what we are trying to unlock in McDonald's.
Saurabh, you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think a very valid point that she made. So, being an established organization, and that too a pioneer in retail, organized retail, you name the diversity and probably we are facing that. So you will have a multi-generational diversity, somebody who's been there for years together and somebody who's very recently joined, somebody who's 50 years plus, 55 years plus, somebody who's just 22. So multi-generational. Another challenge is to have, as we are opening newer formats of business, you definitely require creative bent and you require logical bent. So you will have an equal mix of genders. Again, that's another diversity. The third diversity is, as we are looking at unlocking opportunities, and post-COVID, it all the more opened the opportunities. So people with special abilities is the third diversity. So you name it and we have to unlock those opportunities. The challenges that we also see is the speed at which the business is expanding and the formats in which business is expanding, to gain the loyalty of this generation and to ensure that the mix of both experience as well as the exposed one. I'm using those words deliberately because I remember the earlier days we used to ask, how much of experience do you have? While when we are hiring a new generation workforce, experience doesn't matter. It's completely the exposure and the talent that person brings in. And marriage of this is very, very critical. So these are the challenges we also face, and therefore your every approach, right from hire to retire, has to match up to the kind of generation they come from.
So I was going to hold on this question for a little later, but you spoke about generational diversity and from 55 to a 20 or 18-year-old. I think no one better but Dr. Srikanth to talk about it from Raymond's perspective, which is actually a business that has seen and has been thriving for so many generations. So what is your take on that?
Yeah, so thanks for asking. We'll be hitting a century next year, so 100 years of existence. And we're happy to share that, 85% of our population is Gen Z today. I'm not making up just because I happen to be talking in this forum, but 85% is Gen Z. And other panel members share that, some of our population is also, very close to retirement. So there's a huge, so baby boomers also exist in the system. But what we have also realized is when we are managing this diverse workforce, hyper-personalization, comes to the key, which means, every individual, is given a unique learning opportunity. And just to add one more E to the education and experience is also, to experience and exposure is also education. So more fast-paced, career growth, and, 2-3 years back, in this particular forum, Raymond also won an award where we showed that, how an individual entrant into the store, grows up to the ranks of a store manager within 24 months. So that's like a fast-paced growth. So those are some of the things that we are trying to do to, to manage their aspiration. Ultimately, these are digital natives, they have grown, thrived, and, lived in an era of information. So everything is available at a click of a button. So, but in real life, things don't unfold that way. So, how do you ensure that information is more transparent and so that, they are more updated and abreast in terms of, what things are unfolding and how things are coming up.
Thanks. In fact, that brings me on to my next question for Manisha. And Manisha and me have been talking a lot in terms of how we can be more diverse, how we can actually work together to impact a larger workforce by bringing them into the mainstream workforce and creating and maintaining a diverse talent pool, okay, at Amazon. What is it that you would like to share? Not only from how you maintain it and attract them, but what are the few key things that you have done to maintain this workforce? And especially in the world of quick commerce, attrition, I don't have to say, is one of the biggest worries that everybody faces today.
Yeah, I think yesterday when we were discussing, it has opened up like quite a depth of where this e-commerce industry is, moving. And particularly in e-commerce, what happens that there is a 50 to 60% workforce coming from the seasonal frontline workers, which are very young, very energetic, starting from 20 plus to 28 kind of, age ratio. When they come on board, the one thing is that lot of new startups coming in this space, lot of new industries coming in this space. So there is a very rare examples like Raymond where they will see the 100 years of, commitment or the organization's existence. So this generation doesn't, and this is the Gen Z generation who wants a quick money, who wants their own short-term plans and luxury to be fulfilled, and want to live in today's moment, right? So we have started looking at how to retain this talent. And when we did the mind mapping exercise to understand where this population come from and what is their aspirations in their life, we realized that their aspirations is more about, getting their own identity, getting their own business, because after looking at a lot of entrepreneurship, kind of culture growing up, we realized that can we come up with the program which provides those kind of opportunities to their families. So we have a program called referral program where the artisan families or the small shopkeepers families, or there are very generational families who've been very good in certain skill set. How do we bring them on board and give them the online platform? One hesitance was always about, how authenticate the online platforms are. But thanks to, every situation gives us a different learning. And during the pandemic, there was no choice but to lean on. And there have been many small self-help groups, or there are many small entrepreneurs who got their sustainable livelihood because of e-commerce during the pandemic, and they become the breadwinners to their families. So that's the diverse, kind of talent which we have at a frontline level. When we look at a graduate and a postgraduate level, that population comes with a lot of, kind of a global exposure. They want to quickly get into the global economy and try to, achieve everything. It's like a day one culture is very prevalent in our industry, and that means everything has to start today, end today, and you have to vision everything from there. So with that, how to bring that kind of content in them, right? And how do we also kind of find the well-being? Because we realize that the well-being is very, very important for this generation, where there is so much rush in the life happening, where they're not really taking care of themselves or looking at the well-being of them and their family per se. So that was the one area which we thought is need to be work on. And third is to creating the stickiness with the organization, and that's where the retention come into place. We realized that industries are coming and they will keep growing it. It is important that the talent finding their real sense where they belong to. Belonging is very important, and that belonging will come when their interest and your interest matches well. So we came up with a lot of welfare programs for their kids, their families and their elderly parents, which can be supported through the social security scheme, partnering with the Department of PWD, partnering with the financial well-being, providing the insurance, emergency insurance programs, plus providing the scholarship and mentoring, because every younger generation want to do something different than what the previous generation has done. So what are those career opportunities are available? So that's where we have invested a lot, rather than keeping into the competition of increasing the salary and keep adding the new promises, which becomes very, very difficult and self-sustainable over the period. So that has been our journey overall.
Lovely. I can see a lot of Gen Z in the audience also. And do you resonate with what our panelists are talking about, or do you have an alternative point of view and would like to say? Let's make this a little more interactive. Yes, please. The reason why we want to make this interactive is, like initially Kumar and Mr. Nagesh mentioned, let's have a few key takeaways, because hiring, firing, the whole life, the journey, I think most of us know how it begins and how it ends. But the crux is, today when I talk to an Amazon or I talk to a McDonald's or a Shoppers Stop, I do know that on ground level, there is a huge amount of work that is happening, but it not necessarily actually always is successful. It may not be visible. We'll come to visible culture and retention tactics in a minute. We are going to talk about that, because how important is employer branding culture, which is visible not only to the employee but also to the customers. It's very, very important. But yes, somebody had a question.
etc., etc. And I think you also started with the question that you can see a lot of Gen Zs in the room, etc. So I come from a millennial, mother of a Gen Alpha. I am told soon Gen Beta is going to come, born on or after 2024. So there can be endless, discussions about all this. What I feel is, I think somehow this entire generational story can be probably calibrated towards that Maslow's, the age-old Maslow theory, right? So gradually we are probably moving towards an evolved mindset, evolved way of looking at it. So rather than bashing, I know we're nowhere near to bashing each other, but fir bhi, on a lighter note, rather than bashing, I think it's really a time to kind of take a pause and really appreciate that we are in the process of letting down and shrugging off the hygiene factors and actually moving towards nahi karna hai, doing some good work. If that be the way we want to define the new gens, I think that's the way we appreciate, and there should be FOMO that, ish, I could not have done that in my age. I mean, that's an insight, simple.
No, I think it's on. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah, so I did meet you earlier, so I know your thoughts on this. I don't think there is any bashing, but yes, point taken. Millennials, Gen Z, and of course Gen Alpha, all are welcome with your ambitions to be in a rush to reach the top of the Maslow's hierarchy. I think we were a very patient generation. Bidisha did talk about Harvard study describing us, and I'm not a boomer, so I'm a Gen X, who is a very achieving mindset, but very worrisome. I think we grew up with a lot of worries. So if there was a R.K. Lakshman cartoon, we would have sweat beads on our forehead for sure. So that's our generation. So going back to Saurabh and then Sherry, to pick up on the retention and culture of the organization. When we talk about diversity and inclusion, we talk about safe spaces. We talk about dialogues that can be had without any fear. We are talking about no discrimination, or somebody just mentioned in the earlier panel, even looking at Mia, the concept of Sheetal when you look at somebody without a word, you could be discriminating. So to build a culture which is not, and I don't want to, again, to use the lady's word, I don't want to bash on the whole inclusion part of it, but how does the internal culture, the visible culture, help with retention of this diverse workforce?
I think the underlying word is culture, and culture is always formed by the practices. As they say, there is a letter of law and the spirit of law. So more than processes and systems, it's actually the environment around you that makes somebody realize whatever we have written on boards, vision, mission, culture, whatever. But unless it is not embedded, it is not seen. So as Shoppers Stop, there are two values which stand out. One is respect and another is inclusivity. They've been a part of Shoppers Stop right from the beginning. And the need also was when retail started, you had to get women to retail so that they can address the women customers. So it started from that. So when we are looking at culture, if you want to attract a talent from outside, they should be able to see that, yes, there is a acceptance, there is a kind of culture where I can fit in. And therefore, let's talk about LGBTQ. If I belong to a particular preference or a community, unless I don't see that happening in an organization, I would never want to join that, irrespective of whatever salary you give me, and so on and so forth. That's true for women, that's true for all the other diversities. So it's very important that the values are practiced. And for that we have, apart from the recognition and other things, we have specific awards for these values. They have nothing to do with sales or the numbers driven. It's purely how they have been practiced. And keeping in the mind the multi-generation workforce, again, so if I were to appreciate someone, I have both the options. I can give a physical reward certificate. We have a happiness check, so I can give an instant recognition. For a younger generation, as you rightly mentioned, they want everything instant. So there is a or rather digital value or badge that I can give, right? Yeah, there is an internal intranet platform that we have where I can appreciate someone and the whole world get to see, and they can give a like, comment and all. So what we are trying to do is whatever practices that we are, the basic HR practices, but the methodologies keep on changing depending on the generation or the workforce. So culture is the overarching thing. Visible culture, again, when everyone, so we recently launched this learning platform in association with LinkedIn Learning. Within seconds, people were up, they got certified and they started posting on LinkedIn. So people want to showcase their achievements, and if you as an organization don't give them that spotlight, don't showcase it on platforms like we have, don't take it to the families, that's not going to happen. I also recollect one part which you said that it has to be extrapolated to the families. Yeah, so there are, employee assistance program on mental wealth, on handling very sensitive issues, which a younger generation today faces, and they look up for digital platforms for those answers. So are we giving them those platforms, both virtual as well as physical platform, where they can ask these questions? And I think that's the third most important point of the culture I wanted to maintain. So these are some of the things.
Thank. So in McDonald's, since I work with frontline staff and with the stores, we have almost 411 stores, and we're going to add 50 more stores, right, every year. The scale is very large, as we already spoke about. And what happens is that it's very far from the so-called head office that we talk about, right? And we are talking here culture, but the reality is very different in the stores. They have their own micro universe, micro cultures that they run. And for us, it's very important, irrespective of those pockets of universes that are created, how do we ensure it's the same values, thought process B? Because the SOPs and the back-end operations, yes, that remains same, right? But culture is very, I think, fluid. It's very fluid. And for that, I think a lot of part came in how do we, and yes, people come, right? We hire mass, we hire a lot of people, we're hiring almost 500 to 600 every month. It's the stickiness factor. Do they stick with us or not? And that's where, say, a first day experience, which is uniform across for everybody, matters. We tell them about our, SRIW, safe, respectful, inclusive workplace policies around it, right? What are zero tolerance policies? These are very fundamental but very essential that every person entering on day one understands that this is a safe place for them to work. How do we then transition into, say, a 90-day journey and an onboarding that we do, where there are platforms interactions by the manager with, the overall patch consultant who comes in, the market managers, the people resources team coming in and checking in on them. How is it going? Are you being taught what is required? Do you have the same experience across, right? So, and there's an interaction with all the new joinees within the patch, everybody meets them, right? And that's how we try to sort of have that uniform culture building in terms of what are we standing for and, what does McDonald's mean? And it's not just about that store in that region and those people in the store, right? There's a larger universe they are connected to. I think that's one part of it. Going further, for us, we are at a very nascent state. Like, we do have people with disability working. We have, almost 53 people with speech and hearing impairment. But our focus is still on building female leadership in the stores. And for that, what we have started, because as what we realized is, yes, 50% women join us, but hardly, say, 23 or 30% make it to today are restaurant managers, right? So that's the reality. How do we kind of continue building that? And what we learned through our FEMPA journey, which we have started just last year, it's an experiment and it's going well, is that we focused on 3 pillars, right? Really about building their self-mastery and personal brand, right? And what are those touch points up to build confidence in themselves, right? How do we create those ecosystems that are organic in nature, right? So voices, right? They sort of peer teach each other, right? Within the same, because they have the same challenges, right? And I think intersectionality is something we didn't touch about, but there's an intersectionality for them, right? It's not just Gen Z or women, etc., right? They are mothers. They have other responsibilities. They may be coming from communities which are STSC, right? There are so many intersectionalities that come into that picture. What impacts them most, right? And all of this problem, there is a community they have created where they kind of do peer mentorship. They share what are their challenges, how did they overcome it, right? And they can talk to each other. We will never be able to come and give them advice, to be very honest, because we have not experienced and faced what they face. But they can do that for each other. And it's worked out brilliantly, right? Because from there now leaders are emerging and they have said that I'm going to create 10 more people like me. Right? It's run organically right now, right? And the next step is kind of building mentorship networks with senior leadership, and that's how we'll evolve. But I think that's the way in which we are kind of creating those inclusive, safe spaces also, and for them to kind of drive it themselves, right? So we set up the structure, but we want it to be organic and sort of self-driven within the spaces that they work in. Yeah. Yes, yes.
I think in the interest of time, if Manisha, you or Dr. Shrikant, if you have a point of view on the same culture part.
I'd just like to add what Saurabh just mentioned. See, we started something called as, this house scheme. In many schools, you've seen red house, blue house, all those kind of houses. So we exactly picked up that and deployed. But one conscious thing what we did is that teams that generally don't gel well along, yeah. So they are put together in this house. So there is already a system of collaboration that is institutionalized, and every house is given some points, and those points can be redeemed in different ways. So by doing that, what we could do is 2 things. One is bring that cohesion of generational gaps that are existing within the company, and second is also creating peer level competition and seamless information sharing. And like I said before, that information is a key for digital natives. So that is thrashed out, and there is healthy competition within the system, and siloed working is broken out. And we also started something like reverse mentoring, which you typically see or read only in academic books, but that is something that we started, and leaders are more happy and open to get feedback and course correct. So those are 2 cents on culture.
I think most of the topics are covered. Affinity group is something which really works well. I think culture of a DEI is not something can be run only by the HR or by the DI team. What we learn very early is building that perspective from your business leaders, building their perspective, understanding, and train them to really experience what the LGBTQI life means, or give them the experience of working with the PWD families. We gave them a small assignment with the not-for-profit partners for 3 months and asked them to work with them, with our NGO partners, and then design the inclusive policies for the PWDs, or design the inclusive policies for working mothers or for LGBTQI. And I think that has really changed our perspective, because the culture will be get built when we are conscious and we have built our capacities to understand what we are entering into. And that was the first step, and it took us a couple of years. We took expert organizations' help like Terran and many other not-for-profit partners, as well as the institutions. And today, with that, we are able to demonstrate what we mean of inclusive workplace for PWD. Let's start with a few, but do it a fair justice to that particular cohort rather than starting everything in one go. So that has been our learning when building the culture for all the diverse cohort.
So we don't have too much time. I would like to touch upon a very tactical point, is what is the role of AI technology in understanding, identifying the various diverse talent pools. I think all of you have got your jobs a little more simpler today with a huge amount of technology that actually can sieve through various job descriptions, various people's, I would say, skills, knowledge base, etc. So if Saurabh, Sherry, whoever would like to speak about it, because I'm not pointing out to all of you.
I think any kind of technology is just going to accelerate and enable what we are already doing. The intent is the most important thing. So when we are looking at, let's say, artificial intelligence, it's enabler rather than taking away our jobs. And how do we leverage as a HR professional? Is, for example, we very recently won an award for this, where we have an entire contactless hiring program. Because biases comes because of humans. So the more touch points we have where human intervention is less, naturally the bias is going to reduce. And that's where the entire hiring program happens through AI-based, right from, you just have to scan and the program starts on its own, and there are different levels which you have to cross. And through that, the system automatically looks at various competencies you have and addresses on this. That's one. Second, we are using AI also, or technologies, to ensure that the efficiency or the agility is addressed. For example, you have standard operating processes, which is either you have to refer a manual or you have to refer a man for it, somebody who is working along with you. But what if it was a SOP chatbot? And I'm really glad that we are probably the first retail company to introduce AI-based chatbot. So any new person who joins, I just have that thing is available on my mobile, and I can go through it and follow that process without actually differing from it. But AI would come and go. AI, I think the most important AI is being an authentic individual. And as you rightly mentioned it, that will come only when the leadership or the senior management actually practices that. For example, we recently had a program, and this is the third time we are having this initiative. We call it Serve Them Who Serve Us. On a daily basis, our housekeeping people, our colleagues, they serve us. But what is it that we do for them? So we recently had their families coming in, and we served them, and the leaders did that. Or we have an entire initiative on LGBTQ where we give them a platform to express or open up. And that is done in the presence of all the CXOs. They are the one who also come and encourage that. Now when that happens top down is where you see that culture actually visibly coming out. So AI along with authentic individuals, I think is a lethal combination that we need to follow.
If I may just to add. So what we did is, we did away with our annual engagement surveys, so to speak, because, I said majority of our workforce is Gen Z. So that's where, you deployed AI, and here we know the engagement index here and now. This means today and at this moment. It's not same as that was yesterday, and it's not going to be same as that tomorrow. So basis that, we just don't leave it to technology per se, but wherever, there are escalations that are happening and the same queries keep hopping up, while there is a bot that keep answers to rudimentary queries on policies and process, There is also a HR touch point, there is a business leader touch point, there is a CEO level touch point, at different levels of escalations, and that's where it is personalized. It's not just, you're talking to some alien gadget who doesn't understand, and nobody is hearing. While all of these conversations are maintained, there is an anonymity, but there is still a personal touch. There is the CHROs and the business heads have been given restricted access to the conversations that are happening, and things that get escalated, there is a personal one-on-one connects that are happening. So obviously, this is enabling us to get away with rudimentary querying, but it's at the same time, it's creating that hyper-personalization what Gen Zs typically look for.
I think, while as an organization, I think this is a piece we are sort of just getting into, and we are a long way ahead, and especially frontline is still referral-based, one-on-one people walking. But what we have observed as we are like evolving as an organization, I think all of us, right? I think the awareness and understanding on this topic has, grown up a notch, I think, over the past years, right? And bringing, say, AI and technology is an expensive tool, right? You need to have know-how people. But the great thing is there are a lot of startups in today's ecosystem that are building that for us, I think, right? And especially in the space of also social entrepreneurs who are working to build this gap, I think, between the demand and supply that ma'am spoke about, right? And bringing in the services that will help companies like us just plug and play. I think that's the future, right? If we need something very curated or we are looking at, we will now have access to a larger talent pool that we didn't have. So just to give an example of, say, speech to text conversion is helping our people in our flows to convert our SOPs, and they can easily maybe type even a letter without having to type anything because they have those tools available free on their mobile, right? So we're seeing those use cases that are coming in, but it's going to be more as a service that companies can easily take up, and there's going to be a lot less resistance for companies to say, oh, do I have the money for it, right? Because you can pay for its service and take it up. I think that's going to be a change in the way we look at talent and how do we approach and find talent. It's going to be far more easier and less barriers to do that.
I think as Amazon, we have started with the tech, and then as we evolved in the e-commerce, we have organic as like a tribal community who is selling on Amazon, or we have artisans, we have PWDs. So it's a quite a good integration which kind of play a role of enablement to create a livelihood and the expansion of the business in a collaborative manner. So I think we would like to see tech, or for example, for the talent review, the way you get the inspection done by the tech, it really gives you a very clear quantitative and numeric perspective, which is important to really remove the biases or the, your own limited perspective towards those topics. So I think we are welcoming the new generation, and the new generation demand is the tech, and with that the human perspective is very important, because that's how we will become best into this. So I would say that this is the way to go forward, with a very integrated model which plug and plays every situation and every expertise which can take us to the next level.
So a good blend of technology with human intervention is a way to go. We do have one part which we are leaving behind today, which is how do we inculcate mentoring and growth to these individuals where we've identified diverse talent pools, handhold them for their growth internally or elsewhere. I think that's something that's a larger piece that we discussed, but we don't have time. So we can take 2 or 3 questions if anybody has, which you would like to address. Yeah? Yeah.
Hi, everyone. This question is more on the softer element. It's driven by business value and growth. So I worked as the CEO of a ethnic wear brand. It's a regional brand in Hyderabad. And in the last few years, whenever I had the chance to make the move of running campaigns that could probably involve LGBTQ community, on the personal front, I did not make those decisions for the fear of risking a certain or upsetting a certain customer segment. So my question here is, for in regions where customer loyalty is strongly tied to traditional values, how can brands balance the risk of alienating certain customer segments by embracing LGBTQ community?
Anybody?
Okay, whenever there is a change, there is always a transition that happens, that upheaval happens. Somebody who gets benefited, somebody gets upset. That's a part of change. Now, for example, when we are handling or addressing our beauty customers, and there's a huge segment of both the customers as well as employees who come with specific requirements of their community or their preferences. Unless I don't have a segment of staff who is one skilled, talented, who believe or are passionate about addressing these customers, that section would always be, unattended. And therefore, it's very important that we have a segment of this. Of course, you might lose customers or certain set of customers for that particular time, but it's always both ways. Businesses change society, and society culture does change business platforms. So we should be ready for this change all the given point of time. Let's not look at those 2 or 3 upset customers. Let's look at a larger impact that, when these employees go back and share with their families, the kind of change that brings in. When the customer goes back happy and says, hey, you know what, I got what I was looking out for in this particular brand, I think that's a huge society impact.
I just want to add in, there are various ways as a company you can contribute. We have a Prime Video as a mode where we come up with the content which is quite progressive to begin with and create awareness on the various topics. Second is when we started the affinity group and when we started talking about and creating certain initiatives which are inclusive for the LGBTQ, we had our employees who open up and said that my brother is going through with this, how can I help him? Or is there any way Amazon can provide employability? So it's a two-way process because you take a first leap of a faith and you also learn in this journey because you are going with a good intention and your employees knows that, okay, this is what is, my organization. And today shareholders are also expecting most of the companies to have that kind of mindset. And I think learning is a journey which will continue. So never be afraid that, okay, will that, kind of disturb anybody, because anyway, any change is going to disturb somebody or other. So we just have to take that pinch of salt.
Thank you.
This gentleman here.
What is that one metric, if each one of you can call out, that has helped you by hiring a diverse set of talent have a substantial impact on your metric?
So we have 4 metrics. One is attracting the talent. So how are we attracting the diverse talent through our talent acquisition as well as at a frontline worker. Second is once you hire the talent, how do you create a talent performance and the learning and development for them? So there is a very specific metrics around it, which requires a specific instrument to be used. If it is a deaf and hard of hearing, then what kind of mode can be used and how I'm measuring that metric for their learning and development. Third is how I am growing them into the organization. And last is retaining them along with the belonging. So am I having so we have a tool called, inclusive sentiment tracker, which tells us that is my diverse talent feeling inclusive enough or not. And there is every day there is a question pop-ups which ask each and every employees to give it. This is an anonymous survey which gives a report of every month to see that whether we are performing well on that not. It starts from the L99, which is frontline worker, to the CEO level. So everybody has that opportunity to give your point of view, and that's how we are tracking the 4 parameters.
So at Raymond, we track both business metric and people metric. So business metric is plain and simple, which is revenue per square feet, which is going into any retailer would know. The softer side is, whether we are building that pipeline, which means, whether the newer generation is part of the succession plans. And second is retention and how much of so we run a critical talent program. So how many of the new joiners are part of the critical talent program? So that is one of the key metrics. But all of these programs are in service of, enabling business growth. So business growth, store revenue in every store is one objective metric, and plus, whether they are feeding into the succession pools is something that we look at.
I think one day, I'll sum this up. I think one day the metric would be the customer's feedback in terms of brand image, brand growth, brand affinity, and I think that would call out. And today what Mia showcased is one step forward in terms of saying that let's not only look at our internal metric, but it could be from the customer's point of view by validating what all we are doing as a retail industry. And I'd like to thank each one of them. They bring out very, very different perspectives, and like I said, there's lots to be covered in this topic, because once you have decided that you want to go on the path of DEI, you've firmed up the policies, and like Usha mentioned, there is just go ahead, fail, try, and once you have succeeded to retain, maintain and grow this talent pool is something that we should be talking about in the next probably version or edition of Ekam. I also want to leave behind one thought. This is the last panel of the day before I go on to actually talk to persons with disability and young women who've been part of the retail industry, is summits like these are discussing, are creating and normalizing the conversations around inclusion. There should be a day when we don't need to do these summits. And that's, I think, something that we should all be thinking about. I think every one of us, whether it was Usha, whether it was Amrita, I think all of you guys gave us such amazing inputs today. So there's a lot of food for thought. So thank you so much for patiently listening to us, and thank you.